Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you happen to be in the world. I'm actually tuning into you all live from Houston, Texas, where it is 1 a.m. right now, as we're going to be delivering an epic fireside chat with members of the IoT development team and cloud advocacy. And we're going to be talking about the topic of IoT development. Now, we'll go over a quick little agenda on what you can expect from this session. And it's really going to be open-ended. In fact, we're going to hope that it's driven by your questions. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit more detail. Before we do get started with the question and answer, you might want to start thinking about those now. We'll give you a quick introduction to the team members who are on this call and some quick facts about them, and go over some of the types of questions that we are equipped to answer very well, although there are no limits to what you can ask here, so long as it is in the realm of IoT development. And then we'll close with a few resources and things that we'd like to call to action for those of you inside the session. Now, to engage with us, there are a few things to be aware of. You should notice that inside this Teams live event, there is a chat box. You should see it in the upper right corner, depending on how your layout is. And you can post your questions anonymously or use your name, so however you prefer. And once your questions are approved, they will actually appear to everyone on the call. So do be aware of that, if we do actually end up taking your question, everyone will see that. And we're going to be using a format of answering the most popular questions first. And to do that, you'll notice that when a question arises, there will be a thumbs up symbol. You can go ahead and click that, and that will add more thumbs to it. And we will be taking on the questions with the most thumbs first. So please, if you do see a question that you would like to have answered, or maybe someone asked a question on your behalf that you're interested in, please try to participate there. We're already seeing some of those flow in. And the way these questions will be answered, we're actually going to answer those verbally. So we'll kick over to some of the team members that are on this call. You'll see us answering your questions live. Now, before we get started, it is important to note that this session will be recorded, and we would like to ask, please help us. We do have a few moderators in the back channels that are watching the questions that are coming through. Do be a little bit mindful. If you do ask a question and perhaps it doesn't get answered immediately, don't necessarily continually ask it. Just sort of leave it in the queue, and we're going to let those bubble up in terms of popularity. And finally, and most importantly, we would like to ask that all attendees adhere to the Microsoft Code of Conduct. And so what that's going to consist of here, we're really trying to foster essentially an inclusive environment here. And we just want to make sure that all attendees feel safe to be themselves and ask the questions that they would like to ask as part of this session. So you can sort of, go through this, but we're essentially hoping to have a very, very open and cordial chat with all of you. And we're very excited to have you all here. Now, before we get started, we've got a few introductions that are in order, and I'll go ahead and call everyone out, and you can chime in with your answers here. So this is our members of the Azure IoT team, and we'll start with a quick introduction to Pamela Cortez. You can see their Twitter info down here, and a fun little fact. So Pamela, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. As Paul said, my name is Pamela Cortez. I am on the Azure IoT product team, focusing on all things IoT, dev communities, making technical content, doing a bunch of videos on IoT Show. Fun fact about me is that capacitors are only my third favorite component. And also I've been, I think I was counting down the years, about 15, 16 years in tech, focusing on hardware. Started off as a web developer, then worked the production floors, producing boards, designing boards, and then connecting devices to the cloud. So I'm really excited to work with all of you.
Awesome. Thank you, Pamela. Up next, we've got tuning in from France, Mr. Benjamin Cabe, and I love your fun fact here. In fact,
yeah, well, it's I think it's going to be late for folks on the West Coast in the US, but hopefully for many others all around the world, you will join us on Twitch in a few hours. So yeah, that's me. Super happy to be here. I had a quick question to Pamela. What would be your first and second favorite component? But that's for another day, I guess. Yeah, well, I've been in IoT for quite a while now. Some of you might know me from my days in open source IoT communities, and for the past year or so at Microsoft, I've been spending a lot of times with the IoT developer community at large, and more these days, spending time also with the TinyML and all things AI at the edge, a bit like Paul actually. And yeah, looking forward to answering all your questions. I think there's already quite a few lining up in the chat.
I just love how yours, live codes IoT solutions in 3-hour sprints, and you will see that in the next few hours if you do tune into the session.
And no safety net, and lots of actual live coding. Like there might be some copy paste here and there for the sake of staying away from the demo effect, but yeah, it should be fun, and tons of time for all of you to ask questions. So it should be cool.
Excellent. And now a man who doesn't really need much introduction if you've tuned in to his infamous series on Channel 9, the Olivier Bloch.
Hey, Paul, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, Olivier Bloch's part of the Azure IoT team as well, working on developer communities. And my mantra is that IoT is easy. For those who have teenager kids, they'll understand. IoT easy, teenager parenting is hard. Yeah, so the live coding session will be one of the many IoT sessions we have at Build this year. And actually, it's going to be early for us, Benjamin. It's going to be 4 a.m. West Coast. I'll be there and I'll help you out. And well, we're definitely eager to go and answer all these questions. I see there's already a few published, and 11 of them that are not published yet. We might want to hit publish and go through them. What do you think?
Let's keep them coming. Got quite a queue forming here. Excellent. Thank you for that intro, Olivier. Up next, we've got some members of the IoT Cloud Advocacy team, and my best mate from down under, Mr. Dave Glover, the man who runs a K8s cluster of Raspberry Pis. Maybe you'll tell us what those do. So, Dave, go ahead and give us an introduction here. Oh, Dave, it looks like you're on mute here. Let's. Sorry.
That would definitely help. Hopefully you can hear me now. So my name is Dave Glover. I'm one of the cloud developer advocates and been doing IoT for probably as long as IoT has been around. Maybe not quite as long as that. A fun fact is, crikey, I've been at Microsoft close enough to 30 years. I started when I was 15, and have been involved in a whole range of projects and things like that. So from embedded to Raspberry Pi, even for foray into Windows Phone for a number of years, which I kind of consider to be an embedded device as well. So that's the kind of stuff that I've been involved in.
Excellent. And a ton of Azure Sphere, as I recall.
And a ton of Azure Sphere, yeah.
And then lastly, myself, Mr. Paul DiCarlo, I work alongside Dave on the IoT Cloud Advocacy team. Lots of fun stuff with AI at the edge. In fact, latest project, we make sure that we can keep track of the family pets using IoT Edge and Power BI. And I'd love to answer any questions you might have about AI at the edge. So with that said, with our introductions out the way, here are a number of different topics that we can probably answer your questions about. Now, you're not limited to these, but these are just some things to maybe think about. So ask us any of these questions that you'll see on this list here. I'm actually going to keep this up as we go through, unless we get to a segment where we might need to share screen or something to that effect. But some big questions about, IoT development with Microsoft platforms and tools, Microsoft's offer for IoT developers. The big question, am I in this world? Am I an IoT developer, or what is an IoT developer? The IoT specialty certification, solutions announcements, AI at Edge, embedded developers, Azure Sphere, and Azure RTOS are all questions we are well equipped to answer. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and look at our published questions here, and it looks like the first one we have here that has the highest number of votes, we will jump right into that one here. So this is from Diego. Is there any plans on supporting chips for Sphere that are obtainable? The current ones are always out of stock and mostly around $80 each. Any plans for ESP32 or similar? Thank you. Seems like a good question from my friend Dave. Do you want to take this one, perhaps?
Yeah, I'll leap into this one. So there are, at the moment, there's the MediaTek chips, and you're quite right. There's chips, or there's developer boards from Seed Studio. So Seed Studio have two boards. If you haven't tracked those down, they've got a mini board, which is a lower price point from memory, around about $50 US. And they have another board called the Reference Design Board, which is in the order of maybe $80 US. And then there's the AVNet board. And that, I think, in the order of about $70, but in that kind of order anyway. Now, there have been two announcements from two other manufacturers, from NXP and from Qualcomm. I actually don't know, and I probably couldn't talk to it, when we expect to see those coming through, but we have made public announcements around those. Now, will we likely see it on cheaper chips like the ESP family? My gut feeling is probably not anytime soon, partly because there are some quite stringent requirements for these certified microcontrollers. So, for example, there is an MMU, a memory management unit, built into these things. Those typically aren't the kind of resources you'd find on ESP family. Hardware root of trust. So a protected, unforgeable set of keys that define that device. And again, you don't tend to find those level of capabilities in that type of silicon. The other thing about it is that these are multi-core microcontrollers. So there are, out of the box for the MediaTek ones today, there are 3 cores where you can go and run apps. And there are another 2 cores, one which is running the security subsystem and the other one which is running a networking subsystem. And again, you're just not going to find those on cheaper bit silicon. So that kind of gives you a bit of a sense of where I think this will land. But as I said, there are more boards coming through, and certainly you can get hold of the AVNet ones and the Seed Studio ones pretty easily from what I've seen.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Dave. So let's go with the second highest voted here. This one actually seems like, I'm going to see who raises their hand first for this one. I think almost everyone on this call can answer this. This is from Anonymous. I'm about to build a new IoT proof of concept. My main concern is if I should use a Raspberry Pi or an Azure Sphere. I have a bit of experience from the past, and I built a simple temperature sensor app with a Raspberry Pi using Linux and Node.js. But Azure Sphere is new, and I would like to try it. However, development seems to be in C only. Or is it possible to use Azure Sphere with .NET Node? So I think there's 2 questions here. The big one, should I choose the microcontroller Azure Sphere versus microcomputer Raspberry Pi? And second, is .NET or Node supported on the Azure Sphere? Any takers here? All right, Mr. Olivier.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I don't like the people comparing, Raspberry Pi and Azure Sphere, and you actually mentioned the differentiation between microcontroller and microprocessor, and that's one of the differences. The other difference is what these different devices have been designed for. Azure Sphere, as a matter of fact, is not a device, it's a solution for devices. It's a secure OS, a security service, and a hardware architecture, a design that basically is recommended, not just recommended. If you want to run the Azure Sphere OS and get advantage of the Azure Sphere security service, you need to abide by the rules of how you need to design your hardware. And Raspberry Pi is more in the category of the mini servers and runs Linux, and so they're very different beasts. If you're working on a proof of concept, my recommendation is to go with the most flexible. Azure Sphere is great to go to production with a high level of security on your devices. Raspberry Pi will be great for you to get started fast and leverage these different languages and software middlewares or layers such as .NET or Node. You cannot use other languages than C, C++ on Azure Sphere at this point, and this is not something that that we've been discussing more about for now. Azure Sphere development is about C for the application running on these devices. So that kind of answers the question, and hopefully we can go to more. I think Benjamin wants to add to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Sphere is here mostly to help you secure your edge. There's one other option that I wanted to call out, which is as the Azure Sphere Guardian. Essentially, take whatever your solution is at the edge, microcontroller, brownfield, legacy PLC, and you want to secure that without necessarily changing the kind of code and firmware you run on the actual devices. Sphere Guardian is a solution that can help you with like purely the connectivity aspect and making sure that the connectivity is secure and that you can keep this link to the cloud like up to date and secure. So that's also definitely an option that you want to check out.
Yeah, I might chip in just a very slightly, just kind of building on Olivia's. If you want to kind of do rapid prototyping, I would go down the Raspberry Pi. If you want to learn about building really secure bits of silicon, and maybe that's great for your CV, then check out Azure Sphere. But Azure Sphere really is a C platform, so you need to get your head around that. But that's kind of the other way I differentiate as well.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Dave. I'm going to go ahead and put Benjamin back up on here because there's a great question that I just know you can answer. I just know you got this one. So our machines, this is asked by Raphael, our machines are at a customer's factory and plant, but unfortunately they have no internet connection. Our service personnel is frequently at the machines though, and they thought maybe they can get data from the machines and then publish updates using their notebooks. What options do you see here? I guess specifically in the realm of edge devices that lack internet connectivity and getting data off of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, getting connectivity again. There's several options. One would be to think about deploying somewhere in your factory an IoT Edge, an Azure IoT Edge gateway, and that could probably help with sort of orchestrating how you want to basically take the data off of the devices and push that data to the cloud. Or, I mean, I think the question was around using potentially a laptop and have maybe a more manual process. Like that's also an option. We have SDKs in pretty much every programming language. So you could also, I mean, you can think about IoT in a way where the devices are not necessarily directly communicating, and you could probably have some kind of mobile application or progressive web app, whatever that just like the users interact with more manually and enter the data sort of on behalf of the device, and then it all gets federated just exactly the same way in the cloud and can be stored in your database and processed in your like logic apps and whatever, right?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that, Benjamin. Dave, I'm going to put you on. This next one I feel was written for you, just knowing the work that you do. So when targeting the Raspberry Pi, the remote development extension for VS Code seems the best tool for the dev workflow. However, the C# extension fails and IntelliSense debugging is not possible. Dave, what is your suggested dev workflow for remote development on the Raspberry Pi?
Okay, so I've actually just posted a link into the chat on that one because it's actually a pretty decent write-up I did, pretty popular write-up I did a while back. So what I found for building .NET applications building C#.NET applications on Raspberry Pi, it actually was a faster process. For one thing, you could just kind of go and use the command line tools on the Raspberry Pi and just go and do a compile and then do a run like that, which is not the most intuitive. What I've found, it was generally better to go and compile on your desktop, deploy the application using something like rsync onto the Raspberry Pi, and then attaching the debugger to the application that was running on the Raspberry Pi. I found that was the most effective way. I went through a whole stack of, like yourself, other things. I went down the SSH remote dev line, and that obviously, that, as you said, didn't work. I tried just doing it on the Metal. I thought, hey, look, I've got a Raspberry Pi 4. That's pretty quick. I'll go and compile on that. And then in the end, I found that just building it on my desktop was faster, syncing it across. When you're doing rsync, you're just sending across the changes, and then you attach the debugger. So you'll see on that link that I posted, a complete write-up there, plus all the things you need to go and put into the launch.json and the tasks.json, and that'll get you up and running. And it's super awesome way of building C# apps. As well as a reminder, there is also a whole stack of open source .NET libraries that we've now published for a whole range of sensors, you know, from acoustic distance sensors to BME 280s and all those types of things. You'll find a reference to all those libraries from that dev.to posting. So yeah, check that out, and that's definitely what I'd recommend.
Thanks for that, Dave. We've got a great one here for Pamela. Go ahead and send you live, Pamela. This question here, a little loose, and there's almost like two that are very similar. This was one was asked by Anonymous. How much customization can be done with IoT Central? And then it looks like the same question was asked again. So we've got very similar question. But yeah, if you want to go ahead and tackle that, customization, yeah. IoT Central.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and showcase some of the customizations you can do in Azure IoT Central. So I'll go ahead and share my desktop real quick. Good old trying to bring everything up. Okay, perfect. So I provided a link in chat. We do have in docs what you can actually customize in the Azure IoT Central UI. And so when you are building an app, you can choose your custom build an app, or you could even use our template. I'm using the template right now for connected logistics. But when you go under admin area, this is where you can actually customize your application. So you can see your options where, you know, you can actually change this logo right here. You can change, you know, the wording that you want in your title. You can even change the little browser icon too. Other thing you could change is actually the colors, which is really nice. And then for your application, you can actually just change your application and just have your own image that you upload as well. And part of the customization for IoT Central is that you can, even in your dashboard, really customize what you're seeing in that particular dashboard. So if you don't want to see all of this, it's okay, because you can pick and choose what you actually want to view. You can add logos. You can even add a logo where you can click and it goes to maybe documentation. And so it is really customized. I think the biggest thing we really wanted with Azure IoT Central is you're building with IoT Central. This isn't, you know, this Microsoft SaaS solution. This is really you're building your application. So we didn't want it to look just like IoT Central and that it was Microsoft branded. We really wanted your teams to be able to design your application and customize it. And so definitely, if you want some more abilities for customization, definitely reach out to us on Tech Community and other places that we will link at the end, just to give us that feedback, because we're always looking for feedback. That way we can improve these products.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Pamela. We've got a great one here. I'm going to go ahead and put you on, Olivier. This is a great question for you. And this is, I want to frame this as though you're asking yourself, am I an IoT developer, or what is the difference between an embedded developer versus an IoT developer?
That's a good one, because maybe an embedded developer could be an IoT developer. It's kind of a big word. IoT, we hopefully all know what that means in Internet of Things. And it is about development that spans all the way from the device all the way down there to the hardware that is in the field, and up to the cloud. And you can go all the way up to dealing with machine learning algorithms, big data, data analytics, storage, and these kind of things. And so when it comes to defining what an IoT developer is, it's kind of a hey, it depends. And a way I like to say it and to talk about it is people who are actually more working on the hardware side of things, that are more on the embedded side of the development. They're familiar with GPIOs and PWMs and things are happening at the sensors level, and they're used to work with languages like C and C++, and they're working on real-time OSs and so forth. But nowadays, these developers, they need to understand that these devices will be connected, and that they will need to have a notion of sending that data up to the cloud for a service to consume that data. And they will need to collaborate and work with another type of IoT developer who's actually the one more, I would say, expert on these services that are hosted in the cloud and able to basically ingest all that data, route the data, store the data, analyze the data, and so forth. I think there are multiple IoT developers, but if you want to get started on IoT because you're interested in that domain, you've not been in there for now, you should look at where your skill set is at, what you know, and how it can apply to the IoT space. And Pamela can talk more about the new developer specialty certification that we just announced. This is available, and you can also go to Microsoft Learn and get started on the services that are available from Microsoft. If you want to get started on the hardware, I think there is different options. Azure RTOS is one. Azure Sphere is another one. Working on the Raspberry Pi, running Linux, and connecting to using our SDKs to Azure IoT is another one. So there's like many ways for you to approach IoT. If you're an embedded developer and you want to learn the cloud, same resources, same place, you'll be able to learn more.
Thank you for that. That was a great answer. And by the way, I like when we have you full screen, we can see your IoT.
I'm a fan of that shirt.
That's an awesome t-shirt.
There's only one in the world.
Let's throw Pamela on here. There was an awesome segue there about there's a certification out there, so you can actually officialize being an IoT developer. Tell us about that.
You can. I like that transition that you did, Olivier. So let me go ahead and I'm just gonna quickly share my screen again. All right, so if you're interested in the Azure IoT Developer Specialty, it is a new certification that we've actually quietly announced over a month ago, but we really wanted to go big at build. So part of this Azure IoT Developer Specialty, you have the exam, but you also have full learning paths to support learning the ins and outs of developing an IoT solution with Azure IoT services. And I'll just highlight that it is Azure IoT products and services. And the reason why I am highlighting that is because Microsoft offers a lot of support for building IoT solutions. So we have Windows IoT, we have Azure Sphere, we have Azure RTOS, and so we have a lot of things in our Microsoft IoT portfolio. So we really want to kind of narrow it down because not everyone's going to be an expert on all of those things. If you're an expert on real-time operating systems, we don't expect you to be an expert on Windows IoT. So we really wanted to make sure that we kind of narrow down this certification. So when you're on the certification landing page, and if you're interested, and I'll put in chat, we do have an AKA vanity link to easily go to here, but it's on the MS Learn site. You can see the skills measured. So there is a skills outline. This will break down what is actually covered in the certification. So, you know, how to, you know, create an IoT hub. How do you do cloud to device messaging and device to cloud messaging, or device to cloud messaging? How you configure your physical IoT devices, provisioning and managing devices. We even deep dive into Azure Security Center. Edge is covered in the certification, so I recommend going through this skills outline. But what's really great about this is the full learning material on MS Learn. I actually can toot all of our horns on this call because we all helped to create these learning paths and online training for all of you. So if you're interested in maybe not even taking the certification, but just taking the learning paths and these online tutorials, checking out MS Learn, because we have about 20 new online tutorials. They're pretty much mini hands-on labs that you can take to learn the ins and outs of building an IoT solution. And we also have a little bit more information if you're curious. We have so many questions to get to. So if you go to IoT Show, we do have an episode, Olivier and myself, where we deep dive into the developer specialty certification. Why is it great to have this certification and all of the different skills needed to complete it?
Excellent. Wow, that was such a huge answer for a small question. What is
Sorry.
No, I think that's great. I think we not only answered what it is, we explained how to get there, I think, which is just amazing. There's a great question here, Dave. I'm about to throw you on. Warning. Here's a great question here. When should I pick RTOS, Sphere, or Windows IoT? Oh, sorry. Let's fix your screen here. Oh, sorry, Dave. I think you might be on mute.
You're absolutely right. So the question was, when should I pick Azure Sphere, Azure RTOS, and Windows IoT, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the first couple. So I'll approach the Azure RTOS. So if you're building an application which requires highly deterministic timing or highly precise timing, then you would go and use a real-time OS. So that's kind of where ThreadX sits, and it sits on a microcontroller. The same thing would be true of Azure Sphere. So you can combine real-time applications with what we call high-level applications on that platform. And so, but fundamentally, if you're going to build an application which wants highly deterministic, highly precise timing, it's going into a better device, it's going into a very low-powered device, then an Azure RTOS would be a kind of solution. If you've got high-level requirements, so for things like Windows IoT and IoT Enterprise, you might be wanting to run a number of high-level services on that box. Maybe you're running some containers on that device as well, doing some machine learning or running machine learning inferences on there and things like that. So that's kind of how I would think about it at a very high level. Feel free to chip in anybody else.
Excellent. I'm going to throw Pamela back up here. I think there's an interesting kind of segue question here. There were multiple Azure RTOS sessions, but they were all full. Anonymous was not able to get in. I'm sorry. Can we get a full recording of those?
Yes, so May 22nd, we will be releasing all of those sessions that were on demand. And that Azure RTOS and Azure Sphere session, that was really a focus group. If you're interested in getting a deep dive into Azure RTOS, we do have a couple IoT show episodes that we just made live, and we have deep dives that are going to be live as well. So let me also keep sharing my screen. So we have an upcoming deep dive. And so it's getting started with Azure RTOS. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through every single component. So that's ThreadX, that's USBX, that's GUIX. So every component with Azure RTOS, we're going to deep dive into that and show you what the different components do. And it's a live event. So if you're super interested in joining, it's going to be June 15th, but it's going to be on demand right after. But if you have additional questions, come join myself and Scott, where we deep dive into Azure RTOS. So that one's going to be a fun one. And to give you a little bit more insights of what we're working on, we are looking to do a full training series as well, because we have been doing a lot of our training when it comes to Azure RTOS actually in person. And since everything that's happening in the world, we really also wanted to be scale. So we're going to release a full boot camp training session, modular series that really deep dives into every single thing you could think of with Azure RTOS, every component, but also how to work with the different dev boards, because part of the announcements is that we're working with NXP, Microchip, Qualcomm, ST, and others as well. And we've partnered with them, and we're going to be creating, we have getting started guides, but we're also going to be creating training along with those development boards. So if you're interested in that, definitely recommend looking into the deep dive in June, and then in June and July, you'll start seeing those training videos.
Excellent. Wow, now we know where to get started, how to become an RTOS developer. I love this.
Yes.
All right, Benjamin, I got a good question for you. I know you got this one. If you were paying attention during Sam's keynote, you definitely know this.
I was sleeping. Sorry.
Time zones.
But tell me.
I love this one though, from Anonymous. It almost feels like this one was lobbed at us, a little softball here. Is there any IoT Hub on-premise version available?
Actually, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can run on Azure Stack, right? And Olivier will have, and others, you will have to correct me, but I think that does include IoT Hub. And another option, actually, that one I'm sure that works is, and we see lots of people doing it that way, is leveraging Azure IoT Edge, which is essentially a glorified Docker container that allows you to run lots of IoT related payloads at the edge. And so that could be running your Azure Stream Analytics jobs at the edge, could be embedding a SQL database into your edge gateway, your kind of maybe PLC. But that also includes the ability to expose an IoT Hub compatible endpoint to downstream devices, right? And think about a factory floor where you want to connect dozens of devices which probably don't have direct access to the internet, because you don't want to do that in your car production line or whatever. But what those devices and those sensors have access to is the local gateway, right? And you can have the devices just think that they are talking to the cloud, where in reality they're talking to a gateway that will do some local processing, maybe data consolidation, some data cleaning, and then effectively communicate to the cloud on behalf of the devices. And that allows for a more modular architecture that allows for making sure you don't move around tons of data without necessarily having to do so, right? I think maybe video data streams, you don't want to like send video data to IoT Hub in the cloud just for doing somewhat basic image detection. So you can run this kind of payload straight on Azure IoT Edge.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Benjamin. Olivier, it sounded like you might have something extra to add on to there. So I'll go ahead and throw you on. This is IoT Hub on-premise versions.
So there is a preview. I think it might still be private preview and soon to be public preview of IoT Hub on Azure Stack Hub. So I know these names are like Azure Stack Edge, Azure Stack Hub, IoT Edge, IoT Hub. We're trying to confuse people here as much as we can. So Azure Stack Hub is basically the Azure on-premise, and the Service IoT Hub actually is in preview there. And Azure Stack Edge is actually an Azure IoT Hub device that is developed and provided by Microsoft. So these are some of the precisions here, but I think Benjamin kind of covered the grounds for what can happen in terms of intelligent edge. We can also talk about things that are happening at the farther away edge, the tinier edge, and eventually go there if there are questions there.
I might chip in with a suggestion as well. I don't think it was covered, but we did also just announce this thing called IoT Hub Azure Private Link. Mm-hmm. So the Azure Private Link. So I know it's not quite answering your question, so maybe in the real world I'd ask you what behind the question, but the idea behind Private Link is you can effectively extend your network over VPN into the data center and then talk directly to IoT Hub. So it effectively becomes a bit like it's on-prem. I know it's not quite on-prem, but it's effectively an extension of your network, which may address some of your issues if you've got security issues around that.
Excellent, excellent. So yeah, quite a few answers there. If we're talking about Edge, if we're talking about Private Link, if we're talking about Stack Edge, so yeah, there's some options out there for sure. Pamela, I'm going to go ahead and throw you on here. A good friend of ours from Twitter, Mr. Pete Gallagher, has asked a question here. Are there any code samples for IoT Central using the gateway pattern without IoT Edge? And do downstream devices have to have their own hub connection when using the gateway pattern?
Ooh, hi Pete. I definitely know who you are. You're awesome. So I can't think of the link offhand, but we did have a deep dive where Ranga talked about that Edge support with, if you're not using IoT Edge runtime and you're just using IoT Central and using kind of there is a gateway path. So let me dig that up for you and then put it into chat. And also, you know where to find me too on Twitter. So let me look for that link to provide more information there.
I'm going to go ahead and throw you back on, Ben. Thank you for that, Pamela. We've got a great question here. What is the link to Mr. Benjamin Kabe's 3-hour sprint that he will be hosting on Twitch, and when is it happening? So what is the link and how do we get there? Give us a few details about that.
Sure. Actually, let me, I can maybe briefly share my screen. Where are we? There we go.
I shared the screen up, the link up there, right? The Microsoft.
Yeah, I think, but I think lots of folks asked the question. So this is going to be on twitch.tv/Microsoft Developer, starting at 11 a.m. GMT. So off the top of my head, that's 1 p.m. Central European time, 7 a.m. Eastern time, and then you do the math for whatever is your time zone. Yeah, 3 hours is a long time, but I think back to the question we had earlier, am I an IoT developer, an embedded developer? What is the difference anyways? We're going to try and cover, essentially build an end-to-end IoT solution, or at least like a quick and like a proof of concept for implementing all the pieces that you may require. And at the end of those 3 hours, you probably will have a better understanding of how pretty much every IoT solution works, whether it's based on like custom building blocks or more based on like something like IoT Central. You'll understand what's under the hood, and you'll understand whether for your use case or your idea, and back to the discussion with Olivier earlier, whether you actually feel like you want to build a custom embedded device, or you'd rather go with an off-the-shelf device and spend more time thinking about like your AI and how you're going to make sense of all the data. We're going to cover all that, and 3 hours, again, lots of times for questions. We will be sharing lots of cool tips and tricks on how to do IoT development in VS Code. a bunch of other tools, how to do stream analytics with IoT data, how to store your time series data efficiently, and using Azure Time Series Insights. I mean, lots of cool stuff, and it's a real use case. We'll think about like how can we track valuable assets in real time. So hopefully this will be super tangible, and you can relate to the use case. So yep, again, 11 a.m. GMT. I think we will try to record it, but I cannot guarantee. And I mean, you want to be there to interact live, right? So, yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So yeah, tune into that. That'll be coming up just a bit shortly after this particular event.
Yeah, exactly. It's in just 4 hours after we end.
Just a little while. Excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and take a stab at this next question. This one's interesting. So this is a question: when building new demos. There's a little audio issue there. All right, I'll go ahead and take this one. This will be my one for the call. So when building new demos, I often build a real device and find myself needing simulated devices to add more data to the platform. I've tried console instances and functions. What are your thoughts on simulating devices at scale? I'm going to go ahead. This is from Matthias Vander Reer, and we've gone ahead and set a link here. One easy way to do this is actually writing a module to simulate data in general. So using IoT Edge, of course, you can create anything that you want. And so one of the things that's out there's actually this bogus data generator. I'm sure y'all can see that here, the Azure IoT Edge bogus data generator. You can actually create data in really any shape. It makes this very, very easy. So if you're looking to just create a lot of data to throw into something, that's a good technique. And you can kind of couple that. There's a project out there called IoT Edge DevOps. It'll show you how you can sort of deploy that at scale. So you can actually like throw that into a cluster and start spitting out all sorts of data coming off of your devices. So quite a few ways to do that. But I think the crux of the answer there would be how do you actually create something that can spit out data really, really fast? I think sometimes using the tools that we have is a good approach to that. Dave, do you maybe have any additional thoughts there? Oh, unmute, sorry.
I have to confess to being caught out because I was typing an answer to another question. So what was your question there?
Yes, so building demos. I often find
building what? Sorry.
When building demos, I often build a real device and find myself needing simulated devices. I have tried console programs, container instances, and functions. What are your thoughts on simulating devices at scale?
Probably not a million miles from what he's already doing. Yeah, if I'm trying to simulate, I will go and build in my own device and spin up a whole lot of containers or something along those lines. I don't really have too much to add over above what you've done. Isn't there a set of tools in one of the SDKs which is a load simulator? Sorry, I can't remember, but I'll have to have a dig around.
We'll take a look there. Yeah, there might be something out there like that. I'm trying to think about that one as well. It's kind of fleeting me at the moment. Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that, Dave.
I know where it was. In some of the accelerators that we had, you know, the solution accelerators we had for IoT. I'm pretty sure in one of those there was a workload kind of generator. Yes, if you go and look up IoT solution accelerators, I'm pretty sure there's one sitting around there.
Excellent, excellent. Here's a good one. Go ahead and throw this, Olivier. I'll put you on here. Any suggested strategies for scaling in IoT Edge, specifically egress scaling in light of restriction on direct methods to child devices? That last part's a little difficult, but we'll try to take that first part. Suggested strategies for scaling in IoT Edge.
That's a good question that I'm not sure I know the answer to. I need to.
I'll take a stab at that one.
Yeah, go ahead. You have more
One of-
experience than me on IoT Edge.
So with IoT Edge, one of the nice things you can do right off the bat is scale the IoT Hub. So there are various different SKUs that are offered that can handle different amounts of throughput. So one of the very easiest ways, if you are getting inundated with messages and you need sort of more bandwidth or ability to process that, scaling up the instance of the IoT Hub is probably one of the easiest ways in order to do that. Now, regarding the specific restrictions, it is my understanding, and I know the way that this was asked was in regard to child devices, but I do know you can actually put in requests depending on what you need. You can actually contact support, and this is actually in the documentation, and based on your needs, you can sometimes have those limitations increased. So that's one option that you might want to go for on that one, Andrew. But the easiest way, of course, scale the IoT Hub, and everything that's flowing into it, you should be able to process more of it using that simple approach. Let's see, looking for the next one. Sorry, it's hard to MC this and answer at the same time. Dave, here's an easy one here. I'll throw you on. Is it possible to run Sphere on the Raspberry Pi? This is from Anonymous.
Is it possible to run an Azure Sphere on a Raspberry Pi?
Yes, I think that's, yeah.
Okay, so I think the guts of that question is, can they be connected and communicate with each other? I'm hoping that's the guts of what you're asking. So the short answer is yes, you could easily, and you can very easily connect a Raspberry Pi to an Azure Sphere, and you would do it over either over UART, over ITC, or over, you could probably even do it over SPI and just set it up like that. So, and then you could just come up with some sort of communications protocol between the two devices in terms of more of a high level of way of switching information between them. But yes, absolutely, you could get them to talk very easily. In fact, I've seen people do this around kind of like using the Azure Sphere as a guardian module for Raspberry Pi, and kind of using it as kind of the bridge out into the internet for the Raspberry Pi.
Excellent, thank you for that. So we are approaching not the full end of the session, but we're getting kind of close there. And I'm going to go ahead and cover just a few of the resources that we'd like to make aware. I know some of these were maybe briefly mentioned in some of the other questions, but just to make sure everyone leaves here being aware of these. There is a full IoT Learn collection on Microsoft Learn currently. And this can actually assist you in getting that Azure 220 IoT developer certification. There's actually a number of different modules that are available here that cover some pretty gnarly scenarios, like things, we're not just taking softballs here. Some of these are pretty difficult, you know, how to set up a gateway, how to use devices in unrestricted networks or restricted networks, I'm sorry, those sorts of things. So definitely worth checking out, and these are all free, and if you require any Azure resources, there's a sandbox environment that is available there that will allow you to essentially go in and create those resources for free. And of course, our documentation in general. So this is kind of a big effort. In fact, everyone on this call in some way has helped assist with the creation of this documentation, and it's constantly evolving. Just to make, if you don't know where to start reading with the docs. These have a lot of tutorials that can sort of get you started, help you answer that question, you know, what is an IoT developer, and hopefully turn you into someone that you can say, I am an IoT developer. And then if you're wanting to stay up to date with things that are just ongoing, highly recommend subscribing to the IoT Show. And this is Olivier Bloch's show that he runs on Channel 9 that has a number of different guests that usually come on there, showing various different things that are created using Azure IoT services. In fact, a lot of times you'll see members of the product group on here. This is really amazing stuff and content that you can check out. In a similar vein, there is a special set of episodes known as deep dives, and these are often led by Pamela Cortez and go into really deep scenarios that go kind of beyond the basics. So if you're actually looking at scenarios that involve perhaps how do I implement a solution into production, these are those types of tales, those tales from the trenches on how gnarly situations were actually resolved, and some of those outcomes that have come from Azure IoT services being adopted. And of course, all of you that are here in this session, this is one of but many IoT sessions that will be at Microsoft Build 2020. And these have all been summarized. In fact, we can, Olivier will provide a link to this in the live event Q&A as an announcement. But you can go through here and find all of the available IoT sessions that have been slated for distribution during Build 2020. And as you'll see, there's quite a few of these. So if you missed one, you know, I know some folks were complaining about not being able to get into some of the sessions, which is understandable. Some of those were full. There might actually be multiple sessions for those. You might be able to try again at a different time. And those are all sort of collated here for your perusal. So with that said,
one more note on that one. Well, one more note on that one. So not only this blog post, and I just added a link in the announcements, lists the sessions at Build, but we also will have follow-ups. So Pamela has the deep dives she mentioned earlier on for our talks, but she has also other ones that are ready that will allow dive in deeper into the various announcements that were made at Build. And so in addition to the IoT show episodes that were recorded to support these announcements, you'll be able over June and July to dive deeper with Pamela and the engineers into these features and announcements.
Yeah, because there's so many amazing questions that we couldn't answer all of them, but definitely join us on those, as the guys have said, on deep dives. I know we've definitely had a lot of questions about Windows IoT, and I know we don't have anyone from the Windows IoT team here, but we will have one for a deep dive. And then feel free to go into that tech community to ask more questions, because we're very active in the tech community. So if your question didn't get answered today, I highly encourage you to reach out to us on tech community.
Excellent, excellent. So thank you for that additional information on that. And to leave you with kind of the final call to action here, we have all the links to those available resources that we were just showcasing there. We would like to ask, if you did attend the session, please let us know how it went. How did we do? There's a link for build evaluations at aka.ms/mybuildevals. We'd love to know what you thought of today's session. And also, if you're wanting to go back to find more of those sessions, you can head over to mybuild.microsoft.com, find all of the IoT sessions that we showed earlier on the Tech Communities page, add those to your schedule, and hopefully get to check those out live, maybe be able to ask additional questions to some of the presenters and that'll be delivering those sessions. So with that said, it has been an absolute pleasure emceeing with all of these wonderful, wonderful colleagues.
Thanks, Paul.
And being able to take your questions. In fact, I can't help but think in the back of my mind, I don't know if Olivier will give us the green light, but like this seems like something we could get used to. I really enjoyed hearing these questions that were coming out from everyone. Very, very insightful stuff. And it's nice to hear that people have such a high interest in some of the services that we do have to offer in the IoT space here at Microsoft. So,
Olivier, how about we commit to do this like every month from now on?
Yeah.
Like I think we've been talking about this for quite a while, doing community stand-ups kind of thing. Like there's really tons of questions that I wish we'd have answered, like Pamela said, and it's not like we didn't want to, guys and folks, but we'll, yeah, let's do this more often.
I'm with you. Let's just do it. That's
maybe not on Twitch though.
I was just positing the idea, but it looks like this has been birthed into something that will in fact happen again, which I can't wait. So again, be on the lookout for that. We would love to have attendees join us for future sessions, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of Build 2020. Thank you for joining all of us. We hope that you enjoy the rest of your event. Cheers.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.